when you go through life, there are these moments, right, where perhaps for whatever reason you don't feel happy, you don't feel as joyous, you don't feel as positive as you would like. But here's an interesting thing to consider. It's something that I will have to consider for the rest of my life, basically, because it has helped me a lot. And I wanted to share with you this concept so that it may perhaps help you on your journey as well in some way. Because to become happier in life, well, I would say we have to stop all our contradictory thoughts. Now, let me explain that for a bit. What do I mean by contradictory thoughts? Well, when you go through any phase of your life or period of your life where things seem very dark and bleak, I want you to specifically analyze, what am I thinking about this situation? Because it's kind of like Shakespeare said, that nothing is either good or bad except our thinking makes it so. So if we experiment with this, we could perhaps find out that, well, maybe I am increasing my suffering, my unhappiness, by the way that I'm thinking about the situation. So I can be in any situation myself, and I realized over the years that it is true that regardless of what happens, the situation itself doesn't have to cause me to think bad thoughts. Now, this also ties into what was written in a book, Man's Search for Meaning. It was written by somebody that actually went through World War II, and he was in a concentration camp, and he experienced all these horrors and all these grotesque things that they have written about of what happened back in those days. But he basically survived that period in his life. He lost a lot of people, he lost his wife, etc. But he also said that at the end of the day, no matter what happened to him, at least, he discovered that they can take away all of your freedoms, physically speaking, but they cannot truly take away your power to think whatever you want to think about any situation. So he basically learned in such a dark time of history, right? In such dark times, this author of this book, also learned that the way I use my mind is under my control, though. So even though things are absolutely painful, physically speaking, I don't have to lose hope and become all morbid and negative inside my consciousness itself. You see, this is the trick. This is what we're getting at, is that you have your physical life experiences, but you also have a consciousness that can be trained to think positively about situations, regardless of what they look like, physically speaking. Now, how do you do this? I would say that the best way to go about this is to sort of look at it as if it's like when you're working out, for example. When you go to the gym, you start working out your muscles, they aren't necessarily strong from the beginning. I mean, especially if you haven't worked out for a long time. If you only took a short break, well, perhaps you're still stronger than the average person. But what we're getting at here is that, let's just assume you've never worked out. So you go into the gym, you see all these people that are working out like crazy, and you realize, whoa, they're very strong people. They can lift very high weights. They have strong muscles. Now, how did they get there? Because you're going to discover they weren't born with the same kind of muscle strength from birth. So it's something that they had to train and grow. Now, this is the point. You can do the same with your own consciousness. You can train it so that it grows more stronger, so that this ability starts to become stronger within you in order to think whatever you want to think, regardless of the situation in which you find yourself. Now, in a way, it sounds so bizarre, because if something is bad, if you're unhappy with life, the tendency is to sort of zoom in on that unhappiness and to start complaining about it with everyone else, and to start complaining about it inside your own consciousness. When you go out for a drive, or when you're out for a walk, or whatever you do, when you're outside your house, you always have these conversations going on in your mind. Have you ever noticed that? As most people don't, but there's these conversations going on inside your mind, and they can either be positive or negative, or usually a combination of both. But sometimes they actually might be very negative. I've caught myself over the years doing that. When I'll be walking outside, and then suddenly, like a shock, I realize, what am I even thinking? I'm like spiraling into a negative direction about certain situations in my life, but instead I should trust in the power within me that can help me overcome it. Is what we talked about on a previous video as well. So happiness is the cessation of all contradictory thoughts. That's how I would describe it. You might have a different idea about happiness, and that's totally fine. What we want to do is just reach a point where we are experiencing more of the positive within ourselves instead of the negative. Because spiritually speaking, you will not truly experience negative stuff at all. If you were to be outside of your body, if you were to pass away, then all negativity ceases to be, and the only thing that remains is positive. Now, again, this might be tricky to understand, because especially if you believe in the concept of hell and burning in hellfire and all this punishment and stuff like that so many people, believe in. So again, you don't have to necessarily take my word for all of this, but I hope you at least consider what I'm trying to point out here to you, is that if you stop and analyze within yourself how you actually think about situations, especially when you are experiencing unhappy times, you may very well discover that you're actually thinking in a way that is not positive and not productive for you personally. So you're going to discover that you're thinking more about things you don't want instead about the things that you would like to have and would like to want to become your reality. So you're going to have to change gears, so to speak, during these times. And you can only do that if you become aware that, hey, I'm not using my consciousness apparently in the most beneficial manner. And it's kind of the tragedy of the situation. And usually people perhaps become victims of their own negative mindsets. They don't actually realize that they could change it, because if they try to change it, it feels hard, it feels difficult. The reason for this is very simple and very obvious. It's because they haven't trained themselves enough in order to even begin doing this on a regular basis. So because they're not trained in it, and then they find it's pretty tricky to shift my consciousness in a better direction, they give up, or they at least accept the negative as, well, I guess I have to, I guess this is just my life. And at certain times, yes, negative stuff will occur that we might not even be able to control, and therefore we have to learn to make peace with it as soon as possible. But at other times what happens is that people, because of that negative mindset, they pretty much slowly but surely train themselves to sort of settle for things instead of trying to make something great out of their lives. So they're not trained to control their own consciousness, so then something negative happens and they realize, well, here we go again, life freaking sucks, this is so bad, I don't like this. And the spiral just becomes stronger and stronger as they age. This is, I guess, why we would sometimes say, oh, there's a grumpy old man and grumpy old woman. It's like, what happened to you? And they might try to tell you, or they might just be like, piss off, man, leave me alone, life is already hard enough. You get the stuff like this happening in life for many people that just don't know how to control their own minds, because they were never taught that is possible. But the good news is, it is possible. And again, remember, it is like working out. If it's hard for you right now, it's because you're not trained enough. You haven't practiced this approach to your life often enough. And perhaps you also haven't approached it from the right angle. So you have to be very mindful of how you go about this as well, because maybe the way you're trying to change your mind about it is also not the most effective. Because many people, again, I find this very interesting, also kind of disturbing about this physical life of ours. Many people, when they face negativity or stress, the overall tendency of society at large is to be like, okay, well, I have a stressful day, so I should drink some alcohol, for example, or I should take some drugs after I'm done with work. Oh, I can finally unwind. They're basically training themselves to use physical means in order to try and feel temporarily happier. But what we're talking about is using actually our consciousness itself in order to become happier. And then you don't have withdrawal symptoms. That's the beautiful part. And so that's also the problem, is that people, generally speaking, try to use physical means in order to become happier. And then depending on what that physical activity or thing is that you're going to use, it might cause withdrawal symptoms, which cause you to feel bad physically and therefore over time mentally as well, and you stay stuck in a cycle throughout your whole adult life. This is literally what I've been able to observe in society at large, and you might be too, but some people don't want to go there because they sure love to drink, so they're rather not want to consider that perhaps the drinking isn't really that great as it seems. But again, this might be a totally different subject altogether when it comes down to, drugs and alcohol and addictions, etc. But for now, I would like for you to remember at least that if you're facing bad times, start to recognize the way you think about the situation. Because if you are starting to learn to think positively, regardless of a situation, you will find that the situation, physically speaking, will become less burdensome. It will actually start to shift towards something better over time. You'll feel that this is starting to occur. But as long as you think negative about the situation in question, you will feel forever stuck, like tied to the negative physical circumstance as you perceive it, and it drags you down slowly. It wears you out, and over time you start to lose hope. You start to lose the strength within you to actually overcome your own obstacles in life. So therefore, it's very important for us to start practicing letting go of contradictory thoughts, and then embracing the uplifting, positive thoughts about what we want, what we really prefer and like, and change our minds around in that direction. How do you start? Well, you start by doing just that, by literally, in unhappy times, asking yourself, well, what do I really want? How would I really want my life to be? And even though it seems impossible or illogical, whatever, for me to ever achieve it, by opening up my mind in that direction, at least it starts lifting me up from within first. And then when I get lifted up in consciousness, I can lift up my physical world, my circumstances as well, into something better. Because it's the consciousness that I have that will control what I do and where I will walk and go with my physical life in the long run. So even though things happen that might not have been in your control, don't let them drag you down forever or just give up on life, etc. Just know, I don't like the situation, I'm well aware, but let me start practicing thinking about what I do want, so that I overcome my own contradictory thoughts, and I will, in the end, feel much happier about being alive, about going through this journey. Because ultimately I think this is very important. This word journey should be burned in all of our hearts. That what we're going through right now is just like a journey. Because nothing is permanent that we experience. It is really a journey of experiences that we go through, both good and bad to us. Personally, to us, we consider something good or bad. Universally speaking, it's the truth. There is no good or bad. That's just that's how we have decided to create concepts from most an egoic point of view. And they help us sort of navigate through this world and keep things hopefully as balanced as possible. Because after all, everybody's in a different state of consciousness, and this also again explains some people are good and controlling their own minds. The majority sadly isn't. So are you going to be part of the majority that doesn't practice this, that doesn't think about this? Or are you going to be part of that group of people that actually started considering, can I actually control my mind? What happens if I start to deliberately think about what I want instead of about what I don't want? What actually happens? What's going to happen is, if you allow it to occur, you will feel yourself being lifted up from within to a better place. You will start to feel better. You will start to get hope. You will start to feel renewed motivation to go for your wildest dreams in life. And that's what it's all about. I hope you take it to heart and consider it well. Now, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.